I can see you, Kirk.
Chang.
Can you see me?
Con bloodsucker. You're gonna do your own dirty work now. Do you hear me? Kill you!
Set a course. For home.
I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise.
Shield inside all ships. Resistance is futile.
Good evening, and welcome to the first episode of The Trek Brothers. I'm Chris.
And I'm Shaun.
Hello, Shaun. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Chris?
Amazingly well. Now, this is our first episode, and
Yay.
you are my Trek brother. There's a reason why we're doing this. We've known each other close to 20 years. Hard to believe.
Yes,
And
indeed.
why we haven't done this before, I have no idea, because this is something that we've done pretty close to those 20 years.
Yeah, now we're just recording it and sending it out to hopefully an audience that will listen to it and appreciate it.
Yes, definitely, because we're going to be saying some new things and doing some new things, going in different directions that other Trek podcasts haven't done.
Yes, if I heard what I think, then I wouldn't want to put it out there into the internet.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, let's get started then. And we have some great breaking news, and so let's get to our section called All Hands Brace for Impact.
All hands, brace for impact.
So it's only apropos that we begin this week, because what was the big news this week, Shaun?
Well, we're getting a new Trek show.
It's going to be
Finally.
amazing. I hope so.
It will hopefully be amazing. The first Trek show to debut since 2000, right? Or 2001?
Yeah, when did Enterprise go off air?
Since Enterprise. I was thinking of the start date, not the end date.
Yeah, 2001, yeah.
Yeah. So last time we saw a brand new pilot, well, not pilot, but brand new first episode of a new show.
It's going to be in a different direction, too. It's kind of interesting that CBS is going to require you to pay a subscription fee to get their CBS kind of online streaming to get it.
I think that will change. I don't think they're going to stick with that. I think it's gonna fall to the show or something. I don't know. Okay, I could be wrong, but I feel like it's not going to be on the CBS internet pay that nobody pays for. Anyway, I mean, I don't see a lot of people having that service right now, and I don't see it becoming so competitive in the next year and a half that it does become competitive with other like content providers in a similar vein like Netflix or Hulu.
Yeah, good point. This is kind of a pilot situation with Star Trek that they're doing this, though. So I think depending on the popularity, this might be the new norm for TV shows, maybe.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll work, and maybe Star Trek's popular enough. Maybe this show will be popular enough that it actually does boost this kind of system for CBS. We'll have to see how it progresses.
We owe this, do you think? Do we owe this to J.J. Abrams?
I'll give it a reluctant yes. I think when Nemesis came out, or shortly after Nemesis came out, I had an idea in my head that was the last of Star Trek, almost ever. As far as new Star Trek, I just kind of thought that, obviously Paramount didn't want it. CBS wasn't going to do a new show. Rick Berman, Brandon Braga, they basically said they were done. So I just kind of was like, well, Trek's done for a while. Of course, now we live in the time of reboots and remakes and sequels. So J.J. Abrams came and made these movies that we'll talk about in well due time, but ultimately they make a lot of money and are really popular, especially for Star Trek movies. So I think just riding that wave of popularity and just kind of that kind of murmur of a new show or demand for a new show probably has led up to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. In that sense, I'm grateful too. I'm also grateful that there's licensing issues, which will prevent us from having to watch a JJ series on
Yeah.
on television. So that's a good thing.
Right. Who knows what they're going to do with it? I mean, we can speculate for 2 hours about what they're going to do. I mean, I just want it to be good.
Yeah,
Ultimately.
absolutely.
I don't want just a sexy, action-packed romp. I want some philosophy and some maybe a little bit deeper meaning in my episodes. I want that classic Trek intertwined in this new show.
Yeah, definitely. Like Seth MacFarlane tweeted out that it needs to be a kind of exploration, better series the way that it used to be in the classic sense, instead of this kind of shoot 'em up, kind of ask questions later thing that certainly JJ Trek is.
Right. Yeah. The new movies are certainly, I mean, very much just action movies. I feel like, and there's nothing wrong with it. I do enjoy the new movies. I don't want to knock them too much, especially on this first episode. There'll be time for that. Hopefully, there'll be time for that later on down the road.
Oh, certainly. We'll talk about those in a minute.
But yeah, I mean, I don't care if it's in the Prime universe or the JJ universe. That really, I mean, I can go either way on that. That's not one of my concerns with this new one. Just as long as they kind of get that philosophy, that kind of Trek core into it.
Yeah, that would. Only apprehension that I have at this moment is the time period of when it's going to be set. And once again, like you said about speculation, I totally don't want to see a prequel before. Well, it'd be after Enterprise, before TOS kind of thing.
Definitely not. I don't want to see that either.
Yeah,
I don't know why you would do that. I've never been a fan of prequels, and I'm still not. I think the reason I don't like prequels is because usually they soil what the original did. They take, I mean, Star Wars and Enterprise actually are both perfect examples. They take what was already a predetermined universe and just completely change it. And then, people have to write around it, and rewrite around it, and make the universe cohesive once again for something that didn't exist before. And I don't like that.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. Same here. So that was probably the biggest news in this past week when it comes to Star Trek. There's also some other big news. Not as big. We knew this was coming for quite a while, but somebody came out with a musical.
Yes.
And this is yeah.
Oh, I was going to say I don't know anything about it other than this George Takei musical exists.
That's about
nothing.
Internment camps in America during World War II. It stars Lea Salonga, who is I don't think she's so much well known outside people that follow obscure, but she's one of those ladies that has done like 1,000 things that you don't know her name, and then when you mention something, they're like, "Oh wow, this is somebody that I should remember." I mean, she's done the singing voice of Mulan and things like that, and so real big, but like nobody knows who Lea Salonga is really.
Yeah.
And real big in the 1980s. She was in Miss Saigon, stuff like that. Real great singer, and she's in George Takei's musical, and I would love to see it, mainly because of her, and also the topic I think is pretty interesting. I,
Yeah.
I, what do you think about Mr. Takei and going in that direction?
That's fine. I mean, obviously he's had what's Allegiance, the play that he was in a couple years ago, and that seemed to have gone over well. I haven't seen it personally. I've heard wonderful things about it. So I mean, why not go in a musical direction?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it's a life that, albeit he was very young, that he lived, and it's I think it's fine that he is not letting people forget it. People shouldn't forget that period of time, and the idea of Asian Japanese internment camps in America, because it is an important piece of our history, and he's a good spokesperson for it, I think.
I think he's the perfect. I mean, Star Trek is a backdrop to all this, and I think without that backdrop, it wouldn't be as impactful. Certainly, the story by itself and what he went through is impactful, but trying to create this society, utopian society that Star Trek does, where you have ultimate peace and equality, lays the backdrop of this in American history, where it's the exact opposite. I think is enhances that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like you can't appreciate. I mean, this is going to sound either just mundane or just completely rational, but like you can't appreciate like the peace without knowing what war is.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I mean, and rather than going in a vicious cycle, I think it would be easier just to remember the past, um, to appreciate the more not that things are perfect now, but certainly it could be worse. And if we remember the worst times, we know how not to do those again.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely the moral, I think, of the story. I have a clip here I want to play of George Takei is quite famously one of the main members of Howard Stern's show, and so there's a lot of good stuff to garner from that. And here's I'll go ahead and add a third part of the news. Once you hear this, a wonderful clip of Mr. Takei on the show.
Made it to Broadway.
My life mission.
You know who's probably jealous is Shatner, right?
He's never been on
Well,
Broadway.
he was on in Australia doing a one-man show,
Uh,
and he pumped up the feud again.
oh, what do you
Oh,
say?
no.
Because whenever he wants, whenever he wants more publicity,
Right.
out comes he doesn't know me, but he thinks I'm deeply disturbed.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
is
a
that what he
deeply
said?
disturbed person.
Yeah.
But he says I haven't seen him in 25 years. I just saw him a few months ago at the convention.
Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, but you are
And-
disturbed.
And
Yeah.
he asked me to talk to his ghostwriter who's writing a book about.
Okay, so talking about this particular clip, it's interesting. Not only has George Takei came out with a musical, he used the opportunity to take a swipe at Shatner, who tweeted out that I don't think he tweeted this out, but it was news today that Shatner wants to do a musical. But this is and like I said, he's always on Howard, and I don't know how much Howard fuels this thing. But there's certainly a hatred or something there.
Yeah, I mean it seems like it's been rumored on and off and on and off for as long as I can remember. Um, so I don't know where it originates from or how much truth. I mean, there has to be something to it because it's never gone away.
No, it hasn't, and that clip that I played is it's just from a couple of days ago. So it's definitely alive and kicking and well. But I don't want to get too far ahead because that is my verdict, and this is quite a different section than you might hear on a lot of different other podcasts. But we start with your perspective, Shaun, on consider your verdict.
Consider your verdict. The Queen against Carrington. Joan Carrington is still in the witness box.
So what do you have for us, Shaun?
Okay, as a brief introduction to this segment, consider your verdict. Each week, myself and Chris are going to do. One of us is going to take a kind of a pro stance on something that we like within the Trek universe, and the other one's going to take something that we don't necessarily like within the Trek universe, or something that we want to maybe talk a little bit of crap about or something, because as Trek fans, we're all good about bashing the show that we love for some reason. So basically, we're going to start out. I'm going to start out with something that I personally like within this Trek universe, and I don't have a clip for this particular segment, but it is going to go into this conversation is going to flow into something that we're going to do later on within this episode. So I didn't want to. My clips would have been basically the same thing. So what I want to talk about briefly is the length, as in the length of time of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, because this movie gets knocked around so much, and I don't think it should get knocked around. And I don't believe me and you have ever had this conversation, or at least I haven't had this conversation in a while, Chris. But the point that I'm getting to is I think it's a logical step from Star Trek, the TV show, the original series, to a motion picture, to a movie. It might not be the most exciting, it's not Star Wars. I understand that it came out after Star Wars and it's not Star Wars, but let's not judge it based off that. Within, from the last episode of TOS to this movie, I think it's a good step. I mean, obviously the graphics have advanced. The only thing that it might fail from is the pacing, but I don't think that that's actually an issue. I think that if anything, some of the long, drawn out space effect scenes are there necessarily. Like, it's there to show, look how far we've come. Look at the way this looks now. Like, this is beautiful, or playing into emotions. And, I think there's two sequences that get the worst rap in the motion picture. And one we're going to talk about a little bit later. That's when Kirk first goes up to the Enterprise and Scotty takes him over in the little shuttle and they fly around the Enterprise. And that segment takes a number of minutes with no dialogue, just them, with exterior special effects shots. And the other one is when Spock is entering, well, not even just Spock, when the Enterprise itself is entering the V'ger cloud, because that sequence is also very long with just many external shots of graphics. For me, it works. I love it. I think it's great. But I know a lot of people disagree with me, and that's kind of why I wanted to just start out with this, just because I knew it was something that I feel like I'm in the minority on, but I really appreciate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. This is the sticking point of the movie that prevents it from being elevated to something like The Wrath of Khan, where somehow pacing has become the elephant in the room of the movie, where nobody even talks about the plot, really. They talk about those exterior shots of the Enterprise and stuff. And you're right. If you watch the original series, they use exterior shots very sparingly because that's the technology they were able to do and what they were able to do. And 10 years down from the line, I mean, why would you not exploit that?
Right. I don't know. Like I said, I like it. And, when I was younger, I didn't. I mean, the motion picture was definitely, it's something that I had to grow into. It was not something that, I didn't like it at the time. It wasn't until probably after college sometime that I went back to it, watched it, and said, you know what, it's actually pretty good in my opinion. It's not without its flaws, and I'm not saying it's the best Star Trek movie. I'm just saying that it's good, and it gets kind of a bad rap in my opinion.
Oh, you're absolutely right. There's another aspect I think we need to talk about when it comes to this particular movie. Is there are fan edits of the motion picture, zero fan edits of any really other Trek, but so I wouldn't say despised, but looked down upon that it somehow requires people to do fan edits of the length of the film and stuff, and their own kind of editing. And I really have a problem with that. That I think the artist's intention to have it that length, I think, should be respected, whether or not you agree with it or disagree with it.
Right, and I mean, we all know that this is probably the version that we've all watched most recently is the Robert Weiss cut. He added something like 10 or 15 minutes in there, and I know they changed a couple scenes in there because Vulcan looks completely different from the way it used to, and when they go, almost the final scene when they actually go and find the satellite itself, that Enterprise scene has changed a little bit, and then there's additional footage in there throughout, but not so noticeable that I can even pinpoint where it's at myself. But when it comes down to it, we're talking about a movie that's slightly over 2 hours. I don't think it's even 2.5 hours. And in this time where I mean, we all sat through the Lord of the Rings movies in the theaters, and that was 10 years ago. And those are all, at least this length, if not longer. And then, when they all came out, we bought the Lord of the Rings extended editions, which are just insanely long movies. Or anything Christopher Nolan makes, I feel like, is just, minimum 2 hours.
Yeah, or James Cameron. We could talk about Titanic.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when you're talking about modern epic movies, and I certainly think Star Trek TMP was at the point, a modern epic of 79, maybe for that year or that time period, it was a little long, but when we're talking about it now, it's not long at all. I think it's about the right length, or about an average length of time.
Yes, and visually, I think this has to be said about it, is you use the word epic, and it really is epic, I think, in no other way that the other Trek movies are. Visually, in particular, and one of the scenes that stands out to me is when Spock comes aboard, and there's a giant window looking out into space, like the set, like Kirk and McCoy are waiting for Spock, and they look so small against the backdrop of space, and it's just to convey this idea of how big things are, even on the micro level of seeing the characters against that backdrop. It's very epic. And I think that gets lost, unfortunately. I think there's ways you can do that in the other Trek movies as a lost opportunity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I understand that had this movie been better in the box office, we would have had a totally different, Star Trek 2 and probably 3 and so on and so forth. But because this didn't do so well and it had such a giant budget, we end up getting these lower budget, movies like Star Trek 2, but that works because it was on a lower budget. However, the budget for the motion picture, I don't think was wasted whatsoever. You're right. These, I mean, you pointed out exactly, there are huge sets, on that, are used throughout. The bridge isn't necessarily that big, but I mean, the bridge is obviously a little bit bigger than it was on the television show. And then, not to mention there's a new sick bay, an engineering with these, giant matte paintings. We see a little bit of Starfleet headquarters, that rec room thing meeting that they have. Yeah. I don't know where that's exactly supposed to be on the ship, but that set's big within itself, just big sets. So I mean, they certainly did use all the resources that were available to them, and you know, I feel like did a really good job with all of it. And I'm getting a little off subject because I mostly just wanted to defend that I'm okay with watching a 2 hour, 10-minute Star Trek movie, and it doesn't, get me bored. Granted, there's no real, I understand the features and antagonists in this, but there's no, real face to the enemy. It's not like there's a Khan or a Nero or a F. Murray Abraham or, anything like that.
Yes, yeah, it's more elusive and mysterious antagonist. I agree with you on the length. I think I'm okay with that too. Can certainly be worse, and I don't think it does anything to diminish what the movie was trying to accomplish. So, I agree with you in your analysis. Now, I gave away mine in this section already. I'm going to play you another clip. We're going to head back to the wonderful George Takei, Howard Stern, and William Shatner. And this is something I don't like in Trek.
Whoa. I'm beginning to sound more and more like George.
When you're around George, you talk like him. Wait a second. I'm coming on there. I mean, certainly I would answer a question. I'm not doing a whole sit down. I want to sit down with you two maniacs and figure this thing out.
But in the process of doing so, I want to be able to ask you questions about yourself.
Okay,
as well.
but you're going to derail the conversation.
No.
Howard?
Yes. This is a multi.
No. I think Howard's going to be the neutral.
Yeah. That's all very well,
That's right.
But in his neutrality, you can't avoid.
I don't want to be the subject. You're the subject.
In a half hour, you two have too many
you guys have a lot to talk about.
We might have an interview with you involved there too. While I've got you on the camera, let us talk like we.
Please.
No. You've got to agree to that. While I've got you on camera.
Is it off if I don't agree?
Show altogether.
What'd you say, George?
Bill, you're going to use that to divert go away.
I'm not going to use anything.
You are.
What's
Bill,
the matter with you guys?
George is right.
If you watch,
So, okay, this is... I don't know how long this has been going on. When did George get married? It was 2010, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, and now there's a lot of things to talk about, aspects of this. I have to say that George Takei likes to really feed the flames of the fire of this thing. In the previous clip that I played from the Howard Stern show, where obviously Howard's asking him about the musical, he goes on another tirade about Bill Shatner. Now, a lot of that, I think, interestingly enough, I think that's Howard Stern trying to get a rise out of him. But in the same token, this is William Shatner, and they spend about 30 minutes talking on the show about inviting George Takei on William Shatner's Raw Nerve and Howard mediating. They talk quite a while about it, but William Shatner comes across as a real crass person. But the point is that this dominates them now. Is there some secret thing that Leonard Nimoy didn't like William Shatner? Well, we have to uncover that. Or, what was the impression of Bill Shatner on, by Nichols? Or, it's just, it's a terrible sticking point that I don't like because it dominates the behind the scenes in no other way of any other Trek series. That somehow, and maybe I'm wrong that Bill Shatner is widely despised, but I think this has gone on too long.
I agree with you that it's probably gone on a little long. Like I get sick of hearing this Takei and Shatner feud. come about and go away and come back and go away. And like I said, I don't know if I've ever heard any real evidence for if it's real or not. And I don't even remember exactly what started it. I just, kind of keep hearing about it. You're right. It does distract. And in a time where, unfortunately, these people are getting older and they're getting to the point where, they're just not living anymore. I mean, like, I'll be completely blunt about it. Like, I mean, in the past year, Grace Lee Whitney, Leonard Nimoy, they've both passed, and that's just the past 2 months, So, Takei and Shatner both look great. They seem like they're in great health, but I mean, I personally don't care if they hate each other and then one of them passes and they never make up to each other. However, because I mean, it's none of my business. That's a personal relationship. It doesn't matter to me who gets along with whom. However, I don't want to have to hear about how they don't get along when I can hear a different story about something behind the scenes or something that happened in the 60s or on filming the movies that was far more interesting than Bill and George yelled at each other, or something dumb like that. Because I don't care. I understand that some of it's a little bit interesting, and that's kind of, why we like a lot of reality TV, because, so much reality TV is just people breaking down and yelling and fighting, and we like to watch that. I understand that we like to watch that. I'm not putting myself above that, but in this particular case, I don't really care, and I'm kind of sick of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a Betty Davis, Joan Crawford situation that's being fed into, and I think that's why exactly what you say. I'm tired of it, but every time that's a generalization, but anytime George Takei is interviewed, it's brought up. Well, what do you think of Bill Shatner? And that intrigue into the situation when he could talk about millions of other things, and I don't think it should dominate the media's questions of George Takei or William Shatner for that fact, but they certainly feed into it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you are right that Howard Stern probably is poking that or fueling that fire a little bit on purpose, just because he's not an idiot. Like, I'm sure that helps his ratings too. So I mean, it might be mutually beneficial for all three of them. Like, Shatner will get publicity, Takei will get publicity, and Stern will get publicity for all of it.
Yeah, and it's the backdrop of. It's the backdrop of Star Trek. If Trek wasn't about peace, love, and harmony, and everyone getting along and diversity on this crew, I don't think it would be that big of an issue. But because it's on the backdrop of Trek, that somehow amplifies the situation and interest in it.
Right. Plus, they seem so buddy on. I know in the TV show that Takei and Shatner probably didn't have a whole lot of film or television time together, but certainly in the movies, they do seem buddy, especially when you think like Star Trek 3, when they're all kind of, they're Ocean's 11ing it around to capture the Enterprise back and happy with each other, and then even more so in Star Trek 6 when there's that whole kind of trade-off of the captains between Sulu and Kirk. Towards throughout the entire movie. So, that, I mean, it's very contrasting, their characters that they portray compared to apparently what they are in real life with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not have said it better. Now, Captain Kirk is quite different from the captain in the episode we're going to talk about today in our section that we like to call Talk Trek. And because this is our very first episode, we chose the very first episode of TOS. So let's get to our discussion.
Warp drive isn't gonna do us much good with this knife stuck in our belly.
Brain is gone.
What? You're a romantic.
So, what do you think about this?
I don't think I'd actually heard that clip before. I'm sorry.
our discussion theme intro.
That might have been the first time I actually heard that one. I've heard all the others, but if I didn't hear that one, I must have just forgot about it. Anyway, sorry. Yes, go ahead. Introduce this.
So, how do you think this is? In my opinion, not a throwaway episode. Throwaway in the sense that practically the only other episode that references this is the menagerie later on in series 1, but this on its own is an amazing pilot. Very not very often do you get a pilot that's like really, really good, and I think this is an amazing pilot.
Okay. I guess I don't think of it as that good. It's good. I'm not gonna bash it. I think this episode, and as we get through kind of into it, has a lot of kind of weird flaws in it. Just as an episode itself, and it's nothing to do with the characters and nothing to do with the actors. I think those all kind of work okay. There's just some I guess writing issues I have with it, maybe, or maybe it could have been editing issues. I don't know. Again, I'm not going to bash this episode that much more than I already have, because I do think it's good. And as far as when was this made? This was made in '64, right? Or around there.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact. Yeah. Because the original series debuted in '66, correct? So this was like a year or two before it.
Yes, you're right.
So, for the mid '60s, amazing pilot, absolutely amazing. Like I think had this show got picked up as it was, it had it survived one season, I think it would have had almost and maybe even as much of an impact as the actual show did, because it was, I think, very unique, even in that very early stage, and unique enough to be remembered.
Yes, yeah, good point. I would add to that the cage it feels very 60s-ish in everything, more so than I think the actual series of when TOS is picked up. And a lot of people might disagree in the sense of, sets and stuff looks pretty 60s-ish, and that kind of nouveau sort of architecture and stuff for the inside of the sets and how they're designed and stuff like that. But to me, this pilot is very reflective of the 60s, of the mid 60s. And interestingly enough, it's almost as though, Spock being different, being an alien, it doesn't even matter in the first in the cage, and it's about the woman is the main differential of equality.
Right. Yeah. It's Spock is different. I don't think they don't play to his alien at all, except for the way he looks. There's nothing to indicate that he's different from any of them, other than the ears and the eyebrows. At least as far as he's portrayed there. Going back to just this being a throwaway episode, as a little hindsight just into the podcast again for anybody that is hopefully listening. Originally, when we started talking about doing this, and we started talking about like getting logistically everything together and how we're going to record this and get everything up and running, I wanted to do this as a test episode, and I wanted me and Chris to run through what this format is that you're hearing now, but I wanted to do it using the cage, thinking, oh, the cage is not an actual episode. We can just throw that way and just use it as like a 0 episode and never put it out there online. And that would be the way that we worked the bugs out. And thankfully, you said no, like let's actually make that an episode. And then we found other ways to do an episode that we could throw away that had nothing to do with Star Trek, thankfully. So we're not wasting a single episode. And I'm actually really glad that we're going to, put this on, because it is worth talking about. And I think it's worth, other people taking a listen and discussing on their own about it too.
Yes, definitely. And it was strong enough to convince the network heads to invest in Star Trek. Very few pilots can lay claim to that. They'll make a pilot of a show and it won't get picked up. So there's something was seen in this episode by the heads and powers that be that make it, I think, an important episode, at least in the lexicon of behind the scenes of Trek, if not necessarily what the story is actually concerned about.
Right, and that's just a good point. Just not only behind the scenes of Trek, just behind the scenes of TV and how it's made in TV history. Is like I'm sure it's happened in the past numerous times, but it absolutely cannot be that common for a rejected pilot to get a second chance. I guess from the very beginning, Star Trek was something special and unique, all within itself, just based off that fact alone.
Yes, and we'll talk about this with subsequent episodes, but I think this is the episode that I start to disagree with the label of the Western in space. I don't see it with this episode. I really see it as it takes itself serious in the sense of it being a space adventure, science fiction, right from the get-go. And I don't see it as this kind of cowboying around kind of thing, and hokey kind of situation.
Certainly not this episode. This episode's very serious, very, I think, sci-fi-y. There's a lot of sci-fi nonsense going on throughout the episode. At certain times I can certainly see the idea of, the sci-fi Western, but definitely not here. I feel like we could talk about a fistful of datas if we wanted to talk about
we could talk about Spock's brain and you have certainly fistful of days where the Enterprise goes off into the sunset, literally. I mean, it makes you wonder as an actor what you'd say when you read the script.
My God, we hear interviews from him and they think that's amazing. Like when you hear Marina Sirtis, she's just like, Durango is amazing. Like, I love playing her. And it's like, really?
Those are the best. Those are the best costumes that people wear at conventions. I was in Star Trek Las Vegas in 2013, and one of the best that I saw was Worf from that episode, because it's like you have to know, otherwise you just see some Klingon just run around in attire from the West. It's like a cowboy, and you totally want to get the reference. Like, that is a pretty ingenious thing.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
So let's go ahead. You have a clip here, and this first red alert ever heard in the series of Star Trek demonstrates, I think, just how serious it took itself.
Yeah.
The meteorite beam is not deflected, Captain.
Evasive maneuver, sir.
Steady as we go. It's a radio wave, sir. We're passing through an old-style distress signal.
They were keyed to cause interference and attract attention this way.
A ship in trouble making a forced landing, sir. That's it. No other message.
I have a fix. It comes from the Talos Star Group.
We've no ships or Earth colonies that far out.
A real smart dialogue there, to start a series off. I really like that's Majel Barrett as number one, who is the wife of Gene Roddenberry. You hear Captain Pike, but a very, very well written, I think, to begin.
Yeah, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Very, very sci-fi-y. I think there's a lot of it's not technobabble at this point. I don't think they'd really thought of that yet. They try to, I think, root it in as much science of the time as they could. So
yeah,
lot of.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say there's just a lot of information, technical information, coming at you at the very beginning. But I think that's kind of what they wanted to get out. It is more or less a submarine.
Yeah. And they hear a radio wave, which in the 1960s it would all be radio waves. So that's definitely not an anachronism in the show at all. It's certainly intentional.
Yeah.
And to come across a distress signal, because in the beginning of the episode they're just kind of flying through space, and then this happens. That's a theme that's repeated in subsequent episodes of Trek, not just in this series, but in a lot of other series. Like you think about pen pals in TNG, where Data's communicating with somebody that's sending him a distress signal and divert the ship. Captain Picard says, so this is repeated quite a bit in Trek.
Yeah, I'm also, just a side note, I'm really excited that they got rid of that red alert noise.
Yeah, that is it goes on quite too long, I think.
Yeah, it's fine. It is what it is.
It's amazing too that number one has the knowledge of this just off the top of her head, and not somebody like Spock.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and they make references to number one being more or less a computer. So they took, I think, elements of her character and put them into Spock when the real show came out.
That's interesting.
I mean, I guess that's kind of what I get, because obviously she didn't. Spock's the only one that made it into the actual show. So to take, who knows what they're going to do with all these characters? It's really hard to tell what was going to happen. Week in and week out with everybody, because I feel like you only get a really good sense of Captain Pike. Everyone else, you kind of don't get at least not enough of a sense for what those characters are going to end up being. And oddly enough, Jeffrey Hunter was the only one that's credited at the beginning. I think as an actual star. So
yeah, maybe Leonard Nimoy wasn't expected to go on. But his character is totally wasted, I think, in this episode, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. They just wanted to put a guy in makeup, I feel like, on there to say, like, ooh, we have an alien, look.
Yeah.
And didn't, really develop him.
You see,
thankfully, that got changed.
Yeah, thankfully. And certainly became one of the most poignant characters in all of Trek, and for all the right reasons. It's kind of a weird place to have him start, though. And you brought up Mr. Pike, and I agree with you. I think Captain Pike is the most fleshed out character in this first episode, and I guess uninterestingly enough, because I think this goes out without saying, Captain Pike's actually one of my favorite characters in all of Trek. Only shows up here in the Menagerie, but he is an awesome character to me. I think he has a little bit of Kirk in him, and this is evident in the next scene I'm going to play that's, I think, is my favorite scene from the whole episode. And I think why it's my favorite scene from the whole episode is you see in this a Kirk and a McCoy. You can really see like this conversation happening in subsequent episodes between them two.
Yeah.
This is a great, great scene.
The devil are you putting in there, Ice?
Who wants a warm martini?
What makes you think I need one?
Sometimes a man will tell his bartender things he'll never tell his doctor. What's been on your mind, Chris? The fight on Rigel 7?
Shouldn't it be? My own yeoman and 2 others dead, 7 injured.
Was there anything you personally could have done to prevent it?
Oh, I should have smelled trouble when I saw the swords and the armor. Instead of that, I let myself get trapped in that deserted fortress and attacked by one of their warriors.
Chris, you set standards for yourself no one could meet. You treat everyone on board like a human being except yourself. Well, now you're tired and you...
You bet I'm tired. You bet. I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives, and I'm tired of deciding which mission is too risky and which isn't, and who's going on the landing party and who doesn't, and who lives, and who dies. Oh, I've had it, Phil.
To the point of finally taking my advice, arrest leave.
To the point of considering resigning.
And do what?
Well, for one thing, go home. Nice little town with 50 miles of parkland around it. Remember I told you I had 2 horses? We used to take some food and ride out all day.
Oh, that sounds exciting. You ride out with a picnic lunch every day.
I said that's one place I might go. I'd go into business on Regulus or on the Orion colony.
You, an Orion trader, dealing in green animal women, slaves?
But the point is that this isn't the only life available. There's a whole galaxy of things to choose from.
Not for you. A man either lives life as it happens to him, meets it head on and licks it, or he turns his back on it and starts to wither away.
Now you're beginning to talk like a doctor, bartender.
You take your choice. We both get the same 2 kinds of customers, the living and the dying.
Wow. So, what separates this, I don't think very much, from Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, Beware Romulans Bearing Gifts, and this scene. Very similar, I think.
I agree. And you're right. It's a really good scene. And here's the issue I have with it, because I was taking notes as I was watching this episode, and I think as an intro, this is the first time any of us have ever seen these characters, and definitely, outside of the little 2 minutes that we saw Christopher Pike on the bridge before, this is really the introduction to him that we get, and I feel like it's so heavy-handed and just so right off the bat, like just out the gate, like, oh, here's our captain who's exasperated and just says he's tired, having a hard time, and not into it. And I mean, I know that that's part of the inner conflict within that character that's going to get resolved by the end of the episode, but I don't know that as a first-time watcher 5 minutes into the show. I think it works great. I think it works wonderfully as an episode. I just think as a pilot, if I, wasn't already invested in Star Trek, I don't know if I'd really be into this, because I don't know if I'd, buy it. Because I wouldn't be invested in the characters at that point. I don't think I would care that much if they're that emotional.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know if I quite agree with that. To me, what it speaks of is a great sense of how great leaders work. That I think great leaders always need somebody that can check them, that can say, "Hey, I think this about you and be critical about the individual, and for the captain to be able to just take that criticism. I think that's something that you wouldn't really get from Kirk. Maybe that's a good to speak to your point of why it's not necessarily a good thing, because Bones just never comes out to Captain Kirk and say, hey, what the heck are you doing, and kind of situation. But I do like the aspect that somebody's questioning their command or decision to want to step down. And we should say also, it's kind of a weird place to start in the sense that obviously something happened with this whole other situation, this whole other place, and this is the only area where it's ever described.
Yeah, it is, and it's a little weird, and like I said, I've been used to these characters before and seen them a few times in the past, I think the scene would work just fine. Like there would not be a problem with it. And I see where you're coming from with it adds an element of humility to the leader, and I appreciate that. But like I said, it just right out the gate. I mean, I don't know. It just seems a little bit like, I'm going to just say it again, it just feels heavy-handed on the plot to me, this quickly into a brand new show.
Interesting. All right, I think that's a good perspective, though. I think that's a good point to bring up.
Briefly, just before this, like when he's going into his cabin, there is a couple walking away from the camera down the corridor, and they're in like tennis clothing.
Yeah,
it looks like they just came from like the racquetball room on the Enterprise.
Yeah,
and it's a couple. It's a man and a woman, and she's in a tennis skirt. And the guy's in like a polo and shorts, and that's where you never see that. Like, it's just so weird.
It's like they got lost at Paramount Studios or something. Just wandered onto the set because they were definitely directly out of that time period of clothing. It's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, they were extras on another movie that was filming on the next lot or something, and they were just like, hey, come in here real quick. We needed, somebody in this to walk down this hallway for 3 seconds.
Yeah, I kind of like what I kind of hope. Obviously, this is way before holodecks and things like that, but you see in later series when you go on the holodeck that you kind of wear the clothing of the program that you're going to be in, and I just hope they like got out of a holodeck program.
Right.
But there's a lot of anachronisms like that, because the report that Pike gets, piece of paper, they use pens.
Yes. Yeah, on like a regular clipboard. There's a printer on the bridge. It's built into the console, but it's still a printer.
Yeah.
One of the things I do like about his cabin too is the phaser, or I believe they call them hand lasers in this episode, is just sitting on top of his monitor. If you notice that.
Yeah, I did.
Just got a gun on top of his TV, basically, and it looks like a legit 60s TV. It's like got weird angles, and it's just got the screen in the middle of like a big wood block. And there's a gun on top of it, so why not put that in a locker somewhere a little bit safer?
I missed that. Well, I thought was strange is the doctor's just carrying around liquor in this briefcase. This briefcase is totally out of the 60s. And, like, it would have been fine if he just would have had a bottle or something, but, like, he has it like an old flask, kind of small little thing you'd expect an alcoholic to drink out of, like in the 1800s or something.
Right. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. That works for me. It really does. Like I said, if I knew the characters a little bit more, I wouldn't be saying anything bad about it at all. But overall, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with his. I'm going to be a bartender so I can get some sort of therapy out of you.
Yeah, that's a good friend.
It's a lot better bedside manner than, say, Pulaski. or probably even Dr. Crusher.
Yeah, completely agree. Or the Doctor at the beginning of Voyager.
Yeah, definitely that too.
Didn't have that rapport, which is, I don't think this is too much. We could talk about Doctors, but later on when we start to cover Voyager, and this is by the whole time we get to the end of the Trek Brother podcast, years out from now, when we get to those later episodes of Voyager, there's still about zero rapport between Janeway and the Doctor. Really unfortunate. I'm thinking about the episode where they meet the Potato Heads at the very end of season 7, where she's just annoyed by the Doctor, and there's like no bouncing off of ideas like you see in here.
Yeah, obviously, I think it goes without saying that the original series, like when we get to Kirk and McCoy, there's a friendship there that's really played off of, and a relationship there that's played off in between Captain and Doctor that I don't think exists anywhere else in Trek. The Dr. Crusher's, we're going to get a little off topic here, but I think the next time you see like kind of buddy Doctor and friend kind of fun is when you get to DS9 with Bashir and O'Brien.
Yeah, they're the best friends in all of Trek, really. They're really good friends.
Yeah, but I mean, the rest of the Doctor relationships are all very kind of coldish, I guess. Well, obviously the EMH Doctor on Voyager has to be like by his character design, and Dr. Crusher, I just felt like they never quite knew what to do with her to make her fit into the cast. Not that she's not relevant, I just feel like sometimes they didn't really know how to use her.
Yeah, it could be why she left second season there. All right, so
true.
Captain's having an existential crisis in the quarters.
Yes.
Which is interesting because it's on the backdrop of heading to this distress signal. So they land on this planet, right, Telos 4. And they meet some survivors and things like that. And we get our first alien race we're introduced to in Star Trek Save Spock. And the Telosians are kind of interesting people, but there was this it was a transport vehicle ship that crash landed, and did all of them die? Is that right?
So I guess all of them died, but Vera is the big reveal.
Right, because they're all an illusion.
Right. Yeah, except for the girl.
Right, but
it's just her looks that are illusion.
Let's play a clip where they meet the first antagonist of Star Trek in all of Star Trek.
Can you hear me? My name is Christopher Pike, commander of the Space Vehicle Enterprise from the Stellar Group at the other end of this galaxy. Our intentions are peaceful. Can you understand me?
It appears, Magistrate, that the intelligence of the specimen is shockingly limited.
This is no surprise, since his vessel was baited here so easily with a simulated message. As you can read in its thoughts, it is only now beginning to suspect that the survivors and encampment were a simple illusion we placed in their minds.
You're not speaking, yet I can hear you.
You will note the confusion as it reads our thought transmissions.
All right, then, telepathy. You can read my mind, I can read yours. Now, unless you want my ship to consider capturing me an unfriendly act...
You'll now see the primitive fear threat reaction. The specimen is about to boast of his strength, the weaponry of his vessel, and so on. Next, frustrated into a need to display physical prowess, the creature will throw himself against the transparency.
If you're in here, wouldn't you test the strength of these walls, too? There's a way out of any cage, and I'll find it.
Despite its frustration, the creature appears more adaptable than our specimens from other planets. We can soon begin the experiment.
So we get our episode title there, The Cage. So he's captured. Captain Pike is captured, and this is one section where I have to agree with you. It's very tropey. I don't really like that. I don't really like the Telosians very much. What they remind me of, and why I don't really like them, is I think they're a trope off the guys in Planet of the Apes, where it's very much like that, and you would just expect the future. And I don't think this is giving too much away, but the Telosians, who we see of the Telosians in this episode, they're like the last of their species, and that trope of too much intelligence and evolution and like all societies and civilizations, they're dead and dying, and I think that's a very trope thing to do in science fiction.
Yeah, I agree, and I absolutely like. I think it is very much, it's interesting that you bring up Planet of the Apes in there because they always reminded me of that too. I'm glad that they didn't like take off their faces or something like that, like they do in Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
But they've got the telepathy, and I mean, they're here to kind of prove a plot point, and ultimately, I think the seedlings of what we were talking about earlier, what I was saying was Trek core, where there's an element of philosophy and how far humans have come, or maybe in this episode it's not how far, but how proud they are, or stern they are in their morals, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which it ends up coming out in the end when they ultimately want to. We learn that, or the Telosians think the humans are just crazy because we're just like, no, like don't put us in cages. And they're like, oh no, but it's cool, it's everything you want. And Pike's like, no, we don't like that.
Yeah, that's the cage, maybe, in the figurative and literal sense. Caught in between a rock and a hard place of what you want and what's given to you, and expectation that you would like what's given to you. I don't. The thing I think is really cool about the Telosians, that they're able to do this in the 60s, is the little vein that pops in and out. And that's pretty cool.
That is.
They look very alienish, and it's not hokey, and it's not treated hokey.
No, it's not. And, I mean, so they were played by women. I think, well, I don't know if it was all of them or just the main one was played by a woman, but the main one was played by a woman, and I think that helps give them an alien. I don't know how to say this without being like halfway offensive, but because it was a woman playing more or less a male character, a male alien character, it makes it look a little bit more strange as well.
Yeah, the voice, a higher pitch.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome that Captain Pike could figure out they're using telepathy, method of deduction there.
He's pretty smart. This is another thing about this episode. Everyone's way too smart. They catch on way too quick for their own good, I feel like. I've got more to say about that in a few minutes, but they seem like they can figure out a situation in like minutes flat. There's no like deduction or anything like that. They just get it. Humans in the future just get things. Like I said, I got more to say about that here in a few minutes. But.
Oh, definitely. So, should play the next clip?
Yeah, so I was just going to go into so we were talking about the Telosians, so why not talk about eventually Pike is trying to figure out who they are, why they exist, and that's this discussion here.
Perhaps if you asked me some questions, I could answer.
How far can they control my mind?
If I tell you, then will you pick some dream you've had and let me live it with you?
Perhaps.
They can't actually make you do anything you don't want to.
But they try to trick me with their illusions.
And they can punish you when you're not cooperative. You'll find out about that.
Did they ever live on the surface of this planet? Why did they go underground?
War. Thousands of centuries ago.
That's why it's so barren up there?
The planet's only now becoming able to support life again.
So the Telosians who came underground found life limited here, and they concentrated on developing their mental power.
But they found it's a trap. Like a narcotic. Because when dreams become more important than reality, you give up travel, building, creating. You even forget how to repair the machines left behind by your ancestors. You just sit, living and reliving other lives left behind in the thought record.
Or sit probing the minds of zoo specimens like me.
You're better than a theater to them. They create an illusion for you. They watch you react, feel your emotions. They have a whole collection of specimens, descendants of life brought back long ago from all over this part of the galaxy.
Which means they had to have more than one of each animal.
Please.
They'll need a pair of humans, too. Where do they intend to get the Earth Woman?
You said that if I answered your questions...
But that was a bargain with something that didn't exist. You said you weren't real, remember?
I'm a woman. As real and as human as you are. We're like Adam and Eve. If we can... Oh, don't, please, don't punish me!
I let that go a little bit long just because I like the music and I like the sound well, but part of that's just the music, that weird, funny little chime thing that happens at the end.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But I mean, they take Vera away from Pike because they're both in the cage together, and then she just disappears there at the very end. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit long there, but you know, it goes into exactly what we were talking about. There's and I feel this, you know, is also tropey. There was a giant war. They destroyed their planet, so they went underground where it was safe, and then underground they became, you know, more cognizant, or you know, they somehow gained these telepathic powers, abilities.
Yeah, it's like a twist on H.G. Wells on the Morlocks.
Right.
They go underground, and instead of becoming savages, they end up becoming super intelligent, but still destroying the society they've built. Right,
and then there's the whole like second part of that, which again I think is a little bit tropey, but and also maybe a throwback to others, just sci-fi, is just you know, so they were able to create illusions. They didn't want to live in reality anymore, so they didn't care about fixing any of their old technology. They didn't care about getting new technology. They don't want to leave their little underground lair. They just want to hang out doing what they're doing.
Yeah, it's the anti-nihilism best argument in Trek.
Yeah.
Because they really don't have technology. They just have, you know, just their brains.
Yeah, there's no technology that we can discern except for an elevator.
Yeah, the cage. That's about it. Like that's all they need is a cage to hold other beings.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a weird alien species to come in contact with.
Talking about weird alien species, when he first wakes up in the cage, he's looking at some of the other aliens, and there's that weird like big like monster, and then there's there's just some kind of yeti over there, and then there's a guy in a bird suit, which I mean, I know it's supposed to be some sort of Birdman, but it's just a guy in a bird suit, and it's only a couple seconds, thankfully. but it's absolutely ridiculous. It's like, what is that? Why is that there?
Yes, yeah. Those costumes, those are definitely the most laughable in all of Trek, I think. So fake looking, very fake looking.
Yeah, the costumes for this first episode, outside of their like flak jackets, they're like a landing party jackets, which I love. I think those things are amazing.
Yeah,
like they fit right in all the right places. They got the flap. I think they look good. I think they were tailored very well. I would wear a jacket like that right now. Maybe not that weird color, but that style for sure. But that's the only thing that works. Like the Telosians' wardrobe, I think is, they're just in robes. The uniforms are close to what they end up being, but they're kind of loose and feel big, like puffy. Like I feel like there's a lot of material.
Yeah, that weird turtleneck.
Yeah,
gotta keep in line with the 60s.
Yeah. I just feel like they're really thick. Like it's just a heavy shirt compared to what they end up going to later on.
Yeah, there's no red shirts though. Either is there?
No, there's not. Yeah, it's just all this kind of gold and blue.
Yeah, those weird blue kind of. They remind me of nurses' scrubs with the like what the transporter guys wear.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird jumpsuit uniform.
Yeah, a little bit of jumpsuits going on in this too. Yeah, which those at least those keep going on. Like as the engineers, I think throughout have jumpsuits.
Yeah.
Except for Scotty, I guess he doesn't need one.
Yeah, he's always the oddball out in wearing a uniform.
Right.
Or lack thereof.
So we know about the Telosians, how they got there. We were introduced to them. Captain Pike's off the bridge. We got to figure out what we're going to do next. So this goes into what I was saying about how everybody's just really on their game in this universe on this ship, because here's the staff meeting that number one and Spock have, and the other bridge crew talking about, well, what are they going to do now? They lost Captain Pike. They were back on the ship. Here's where we go now.
The inhabitants of this planet must live deep underground, probably manufacture food and other needs down there. Now, our tests indicate the planet's surface without considerably more vegetation or some animals, simply too barren to support life.
So we just thought we saw survivors there, Mr. Spock.
Exactly. An illusion, placed in our minds by this planet's inhabitants.
It was a perfect illusion. They had us seeing just what we wanted to see. Human beings who'd survived with dignity and bravery. Everything entirely logical, right down to the building of the camp, the tattered clothing, everything. Now, let's be sure we understand the danger of this. The inhabitants of this planet can read our minds. They can create illusions out of a person's own thoughts, memories, and experiences, even out of a person's own desires. Illusions just as real and solid as this tabletop and just as impossible to ignore.
Any estimate what they might want one of us for?
They may simply be studying the captain to find out how Earth people are put together. Or it could be something more.
Then why aren't we doing anything? Now, that entry may have stood up against hand lasers, but we can transmit the ship's power against it. Enough to blast half a continent.
Look. Brains 3 times the size of ours. If we start buzzing about down there, we're liable to find their mental power is so great, they could reach out and swat this ship as though it were a fly.
It's Captain Pike they've got. He needs help, and he probably needs it fast.
Engineering deck will rig to transmit ship's power. We'll try blasting through that metal.
Okay. I mean, like, I understand that they could probably figure out, like, the vegetation issue and, like, the surface is barren and has been barren for a while and how long and possibly a little bit why. A little bit of the why. However, how do they just figure out, oh, it was all an illusion, they're underground, their brains are 3 times the size, far as power is concerned as ours. Like, how did they get to any of these conclusions? Any of those? Like, I feel like it's bad scientific method.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's never brought up that what they're doing right now could be an illusion. They could be an illusion in an illusion. And you're right. From the outside, it's almost they have all the answers. They really do have all the answers, and they're just kind of going through step by step for the audience of here's what you're supposed to think about this and know about this.
Right. Yeah.
And weird dialogue from Spock, buzzing about. Weird. We talk about Spock quite a bit. Yeah, in this scene, you get wow, like Spock's not like the other Spocks, but technology-wise too. Going back real quick, he has the Palm Pilot screen.
Yeah.
And the weird helmsman that's somehow just wounded.
Yes, he does.
and recovered. Very strange characters, but there is what they discuss. I agree with you on. I do like that they do discuss this kind of things in situation, like the episode of TNG where Captain Picard is down on the surface with the Temerian, and it's they have a staff meeting about what they're going to do next. And I think that's pretty cool because that's repeated in Trek later on. But how they discuss it in this episode and what they discuss is pretty far-fetched.
Right. Yeah. It's just, and this is what I was talking about earlier, where I feel like it's edited weird because to get to that point, there's at least one step missing. And I understand, you can skip over a lot of or glaze over a lot of science or the deduction process, but to go from basically we haven't seen any of these characters hardly at all except for a little bit in the landing party, a little bit in the intro, and then here they all are meeting together and this is what they came up with. It's there should have been something a little bit more there. You could have taken down the Pike fantasy illusion scenes, I think, a touch and just added more to this scene, and it would have been a little bit more cohesive.
The Doctor should have spoke up there and said, well, Pike told me 2 hours ago that he was having an existential crisis and didn't care if he died or not, and we should just leave him. And it never brings that up. He's the guy who by all means should go into counseling, and they're gonna save him. It's very amazing, and they come up with a great plan of just blast their way with a cannon. I think that cannon needs to show up more often.
Oh yeah, I know. I wrote that down in my notes. A giant cannon should be around. That's fun.
Yeah, it is. It's a great piece. That could have really helped in certain situations. But what's funny is they have that high tech cannon in this episode, and it's real poignant piece of equipment that they use. And then Captain Kirk could just build his own. So it makes you wonder about how great is that cannon that they had? That's Starfleet technology.
That's true. Another thing about their little conference room scene is right before Spock says their brains are 3 times the size or whatever he says about it, he brings up a picture on the view screen of a Telosian. It's just a pencil drawing of a Telosian.
That's right. They had to draw it real fast because they've never seen the Telosians before. This is their first encounter, and somehow the pre-production photo made it into the computer banks of the Enterprise.
Oh my god! And it's a picture that you'd find in a medical textbook or something like that, because it's just there's no shadowing or anything like that. It's just from an angle. It's all just single solid lines.
Yes.
Grayscaled.
Definitely a ridiculous picture.
That picture, that drawing of Telosian tells me nothing about anything that they're talking about. They could have just put a picture up of a frog or something and said the same dialogue, and it would have made as much sense.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, talking about how quick they are to like just come to conclusions.
Mhm.
You know, some stuff goes down on the planet. Like we get the scenes with Pike, and he's, you know, like his horse picnic, and then the Orion slave scene and all that. His little goofy illusions that he has. They take him back to Rigel 7, where he lost his crew members, and he relives that for a minute. And so there's some time that has apparently passed.
Mhm.
But all of a sudden, we're back on the bridge, and Spock's in command, and this is what we get. And this is actually going to be two clips that are spliced together because the scenes aren't all one, but you'll get the point.
Press intercom.
Open, sir.
This is the acting captain speaking. We've no choice now but to consider the safety of this vessel and the remainder of the crew. We're leaving. All decks prepare for hyperdrive. Time warp factor.
Mr. Spock, the ship's controls have gone dead.
Engine room.
Open.
Mr. Spock here. Switch to rockets. We're blasting out.
All systems are out, Bridge. We got nothing.
There's nothing. Every system aboard is fading out.
Nothing. Not for the batteries, we'd lose gravitation. Oxygen. The computers.
I can't shut it off. It's running through our library. Tapes, micro records, everything. It doesn't make sense.
Could be we waited too long. Collecting all the information stored in this fly. They've decided to swat us.
So there's Spock using some funny terminology again, and yelling a lot.
Yes, and in command. What happened in number 1?
Well, by this point, is this after the women scene?
That's right.
So yeah, which we don't have, but and I don't think it's necessary to have because everyone that knows this episode knows that line. But they try to beam back down to the planet, and the yeoman in number 1 get taken away. And so after that, apparently Spock's just like, screw it, that's it, we're done. Pike's done, we're leaving, we're going. I'm in command now, and I feel like they could have tried a little bit more, a little bit longer, or shown something. It's just like, nope, we're leaving.
And the Enterprise gets screwed. I love the helmsman in this scene too, and I have to say, if there's one character out of this pilot episode I'm sad that I really don't see is the helmsman. He's a fantastic actor.
Yeah, I like him too. He doesn't have a whole lot to do, but he's in a bunch of different scenes. Integral, like he's, you know, he moves the plot along more so than a lot of people. Even Spock. But yeah, he's great.
Yeah, I do like him. What I was gonna say is they don't show any exterior of the Enterprise, even in this what's happening here, which would be pretty cool to see because the ship seems like it's all being drained of its information by the Telosians. Amazing that they have that kind of thing. They should have done that as soon as they entered their orbit. You'd think.
You're right. When they're trying to repair, so like where the clips like cut, where it's two different clips, and you can tell where they got like cut together. So when we come back, the second clip that was part of that sequence, they're trying to repair the Enterprise, which is hilarious because they've got like a flashlight on a crane kind of thing around the helm console. You know, something like you'd see in a garage, and then it gets really cool because when the Telosians are trying to read the computers, everything goes dark and there's flashing lights everywhere, and the lighting, like it shows reaction shots of Spock and the helmsman and the rest of the crew, and it's really fun lighting, like the way everything's just flashing and going off at that point. Like I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, that was very, very good on the production side.
Yeah, it made up for the fact that they didn't make them take their shoes off, so when they're all running around the bridge, you just hear.
Yeah.
I didn't notice at first when I was watching it, but just listening to that clip just now, I was like, oh my god, like listen to them stomp around. So, which I know is constantly a problem because I mean, like in Next Generation, they wear like booties and stuff like that. If you don't see their shoes, they're usually not wearing shoes because they make too much noise.
Yeah, they have more carpet, I think, in that series.
That's true. There's more carpet too.
Than any other series. So the whole time this is happening, Captain, as we said, Captain Pike's been on the surface, and one of the most ridiculous parts of the plot points of the series is of this episode, to me, is they want to create an Adam and Eve, but they're gonna put Adam through hell. And in situations that he might die in, like he has to fight for her. It's just, I don't know. It's really weird to me that you would do that. And I mean, later on, and maybe the writers were definitely cognizant of this point, because later on he says, just why didn't you just ask? Like if it was that big of a thing, you didn't need to do this to us. But so they put. The captain is having the greatest existential crisis in the history of Star Trek through this, and at the end, they escape, and they're on the surface, and he threatens the Telosians here.
As you see, your attempt to escape accomplished nothing.
I want to contact our ship.
You are now on the surface where we wished you to be. With the female of your choice, you will now begin carefully guided lives.
Start by burying you?
That is your choice. To help you reclaim the planet's surface, our zoological gardens will furnish a variety of plant life.
Look, I'll make a deal with you. You and your life for the lives of these 2 Earth women.
Since our lifespan is many times yours, we have time to evolve you into a society trained to serve as artisans, technicians.
You understand what I'm saying? You give me proof that our ship is all right, send these 2 back, and I'll stay with Vina.
It's wrong to create a whole race of humans to live as slaves.
Is this a deception? Do you intend to destroy yourselves?
What is that?
The weapon is building up an overload, a forced chamber explosion. You still have time to get underground. Well, go on! Just to show you how primitive humans are, Telosian, you go with her.
If you all think it's this important, then I can't go either. I suppose if they have one human being, they might try again.
Wow. So, they might just blow themselves up to smithereens. And this freaks out the Telosians.
Yes. The old self-destruct. I feel like that's the course at the Academy. When to threaten to blow yourself up.
There's
win the day.
Numerous times in Trek when they set the Enterprise itself to self-destruct.
Yeah, it's what we do, I guess. It's what we're taught in the future. It's better to die for your principles than to live in a happy, illusion zoo.
Yes. They sort of best him, though, because they end up revealing Vera. And she's jacked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a reason why she's, wants to be there.
Yeah, and, later on, when he comes back in Menagerie, it echoes that sentiment of her within Pike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Enterprise is okay up there, and the ending of the episode's kind of a letdown to me.
Yeah, a little bit.
Could have been handled a little better. they get freaked out, the Telosians, and just kind of let the Enterprise go. Because humans are too crazy of a species to want to use as an Adam and Eve.
Right? Yeah, that's the whole point of all of this. Is that oh, you guys are just crazy. Go away.
You like the overall episode though, huh? It's like you say, it has its good and it has its problematic sections in it. But as a beginning pilot episode, I think it's could have asked for better.
Yeah, it's a good episode. Nobody saw this for years. I think Gene took it around like conventions in the like 80s and 70s, and then eventually I think it got released on VHS or something like that. So for the longest time, people had the original series. They even had some of the movies, and I don't think people really knew about this or had heard about it. And I think the first version I saw was even black and white.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I could be wrong on that, just not remembering it. I do certainly know that the first time I saw this was on VHS, and it had an intro by Gene Roddenberry talking about how it was rejected and all that fun stuff.
Well, we know the history of Trek. It's picked up as a series. And they revisit this episode. I mean, literally, in what you can call the first clip show of Star Trek. They practically play this whole episode within the menagerie.
Yes.
We're going to do something a little different from a lot of other podcasts. I think that Trek is interesting in that you have a lot of big story arcs that transcend particular episodes, and this episode's no different. It is repeated, like I said. I won't give away the menagerie because we're going to discuss the menagerie, but menagerie takes place 11 years after this episode. It's important to discuss what happened to Telosia. You can't go to Telosia for their Talos 4. Can't visit the Telosians in their fake world. But we find out what happens to Christopher Pike subsequent to this episode 11 years later, and he gets jacked up, and it's kind of a sad way of a guy that was having already an existential crisis to begin with to get jacked up in a training situation, but that gives way to Captain Kirk coming into the Enterprise. Real good scene here from the menagerie, and we'll cover this quite a few weeks here, but I like this scene.
As you see, your attempt to escape accomplished nothing.
I played the wrong one. Here it is. Here it is.
No, Jim, I just can't understand this.
Mr. Spock received a transmission from the starbase. A message from the former commander of the Enterprise fleet, Captain Pike, urgently requesting that we divert here.
Impossible.
If my first officer states that he received a transmission from
Jim, I'm not doubting anyone's word.
Jose.
I'm simply telling you it's impossible.
Why?
You don't know. You actually don't know what's happened to Captain Pike. There's been subspace chatter about it for months. I'm sorry to have to be the one to show you. He's upstairs in the medical section. You ever met Chris Pike?
We met when he was promoted to fleet captain.
About your age. Big, handsome man, vital, active.
I took over the Enterprise from Spock. Served with him for several years.
11 years, 4 months, 5 days. What's his problem, Commodore? Inspection tour of a cadet vessel. Old Class J starship. One of the baffle plates ruptured. The Delta rays? He went in, bringing out all those kids that were still alive. Just wanted you gentlemen to be prepared.
So a lot different from a lot different sounding Spock from the epised of the Cage.
Yes, he's come down a lot.
Now he's Chris Pike is definitely in a cage, in a cage of wheelchair there, but very different sounding Trek than the pilot episode that we just talked about.
Oh yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell the audience, we're going to refrain from sort of giving a rating to episodes individually, and look more broadly at what's going on in certain seasons, certain arcs, and judge episodes and arcs that way instead of on an individual basis. Because I think it's all very complex. And to that point, I mean, you can't really look at this episode without looking at the menagerie.
Right. Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I don't know how you. I mean, you can certainly rate episodes, but we kind of decided that we're not going to do that. Lists work, top 10s, top 5s, those all work, and those I like watching and listening to shows and videos and stuff like that, that do stuff like that, but it's not something that we want to do ourselves. If I were going to give this a rating too, I'd give it something ridiculous like 7 men in bird costumes out of, like 20. 23 is the scale. 23 is the maximum, and I'm giving it 7 bad bird costumes. So do with that what you will.
Wonderful. Our next section is pretty unique, I think, because we're going to start with Shaun Trek.
Will you require any assistance here?
This time we'll handle things without your help.
Do you need help, Shaun? You go ahead.
I don't need any help. And so what I'm going to try to do week to week is, I'm on Twitter a fair amount. I follow a lot of the Star Trek actors and sites and everything on Twitter. So I'm just going to pull out, I don't know, a tweet or an event that's going through on Twitter that they're talking about or they've posted or something like that. And I'm going to start out week 1 really simple, something that was posted earlier today. And for those who don't know, StarTrek.com does like a poll, like a little quiz week after week that people can vote on, and they always have the final results. Well, they tweeted their results of their poll from last week today. I believe that's where this tweet comes from. At any rate, it's a poll tweet. So it's which one of these Trek tech would you like to have for the day? And they only gave 2 options, one being the food replicator and the other being the holodeck. The holodeck got 72% of the votes, and food replicator only got 28%. Slightly over 2,000 people submitted votes for this. Now, I think this is an interesting question, and when I first saw it, I didn't quite read the question right, because I was like, oh, that can't be right. How would you want a holodeck over a food replicator? But then I saw it for the day, and it said, oh, of course you'd want a holodeck over a food replicator. So I guess the crux of this question is, if it was just one day, if it was 24 hours, no questions, holodeck. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, Chris, but I'm all for holodeck. It's just one single day out of our lives. I get to use one of those things from Star Trek. Holodeck is the answer.
Yeah, I would say holodeck also. This is obviously a late Trek, because in early Trek, I think it's pretty cool that they just have chefs. But
yes.
Yeah, tech now I would definitely say holodeck.
Right, and I mean, however, I don't know if it were just phrased as what would you like to have, just forever. I would definitely take food replicator over holodeck.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can replicate food within a holodeck program. They have food though, but
yeah,
yeah,
maybe one's within the other. I don't know.
You'd think just whatever they replicate though within the holodeck is just photons and force fields, so they wouldn't really be able to eat anything in there.
Right.
That's kind of weird. Yeah, so maybe the replicator over the long term.
Yeah, well, then you could get a chicken sandwich every day, and it'd be fine until Tribbles got into it and ruined it. But I don't know. I'd rather have solid food every day at the command of a voice or the touch of a button, rather than A holodeck would be cool, but that's like having a really nice like video game system. It's like I'm not gonna be able to use it all of the time. It's not super practical.
Right. Those were where those two people came from early in the episode is the holodeck that we talked about them wearing the Hawaiian shirts. They were on vacation.
That's true. Yeah.
Nice.
The badminton program.
Anything else from Twitterverse?
Nah, that's all I'm gonna do for this first run.
Wonderful.
Wanted to keep that fairly light and concise this time going around. We'll play with it, I think, as the weeks go on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get to my section, Chris Trek here, and I'm gonna talk about some every week Star Trek Online, and real exciting time in Star Trek Online right now. Season 11 just launched. The Iconian War is over in the galaxy, and we have the Mirror Universe to talk about. So that's a little cutscene from an STF that you play in there, Shaun. You're not on Star Trek Online, are you, Shaun?
I am not. I know very little about it. Your whole intro sounds insane on what's going on in there.
Yes, it's pretty insane storyline. Several things to say real quick about Star Trek Online. Shaun's not of the minority. There's a lot of Star Trek fans out there that don't play Star Trek Online. For the biggest reason is it's not real heavy on the exploration kind of side. You're just constantly firing at enemies, and that's Star Trek Online essentially. However, one of the things I've been real respectful, Star Trek Online, Perfect World has been able to get voice actors. Just now that we're in season 11, they have Chase Masterson who played Lita in DS9, and she comes back as Mirror Lita, and that's for the past 5 years. If you wanted any new Trek, that's you had to go on Star Trek Online. One thing I don't want this section necessarily to be about. I mean, there's a lot of good podcasts on the specifics of Star Trek Online, as far as builds and things like that. And if any of the listeners are real interested in that, the two shows that I think are the best, you can find them on YouTube, are called The Pilot Review and also just The Show. So if you're interested in the real technical stuff, specifically on how to do good damage and stuff like that in STO, then certainly do that. For my purposes, though, because we're a Star Trek podcast talking about episodes and stuff like that, I want to gear this more towards the side of story and what's going on in there. So just as a real quick catch up for Shaun, there was an Iconian War, Shaun.
Okay, there's an entire war in this game. That sounds interesting. It's not just Star Trek. I've never played any like MMO of this size. I've never done like Warcraft or anything like that.
Oh, they're good fun. It's fun stuff. You meet a lot of people. Nice thing about something like Star Trek Online, you meet people that are of the like mind of liking Star Trek.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. It's not something that I'm opposed to, and not something that I necessarily wouldn't ever try. It's just a very unique kind of gaming experience than I'm accustomed to, and I'm not by any means a huge gamer.
Oh, I think you should. I think everybody should try it, and they will become a huge gamer. So yes, that's the status of the Iconian War is over, and in the coming weeks, talk more about Admiral Lita of the ISS Enterprise and the Mirror Universe.
Yes, Mirror Universe in this game sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
Oh, completely. And we're going to do something else that's kind of unique next, is incorporate the movies in our discussion of Trek overall, not just episodic-wise. And that's our next section here, called Film Trek.
Saddle up. Lock and load. Star Trek Insurrection is the #1 action movie in America.
Movie people out!
The New York Times calls it seductively appealing. This is the moment we've planned. One of the year's 10 best.
Shaun, I think the New York Times was wrong. But anyway, this week, Shaun picked the movie scene we're going to talk about. So go ahead, Shaun.
Well, I hope that this scene is actually seductively appealing. I already forgot it. I heard it 5 seconds ago, but that nonsensical quote that they gave for instruction. Anyway, so this ties into what we were talking about at the top of the show, and we went into a little bit of the motion picture and how it's long and why it's long and why I like that, and actually why we like that. I didn't even know that you were necessarily okay with the length of it, Chris. But I'm just going to start this. It's right before one of the scenes that everybody complains about. It's actually the intro to that. So it involves just Kirk and Kirk and Scotty. But let's just listen to it.
Admiral, Mr. Scott, those departure orders, 12 hours. Starfleet cannot be serious.
Why aren't the Enterprise transporters operating, Mr. Scott?
Oh, we problems, sir. Just temporary. Admiral, we have just finished 18 months redesigning and refitting the Enterprise. How in the name of hell do they expect me to have her ready in 12 hours?
Take me over, please.
She needs more work, sir. A shakedown.
Mr. Scott, an alien object of unbelievable destructive power is less than 3 days away from this planet. The only starship in interception range is the Enterprise. Ready or not, she launches in 12 hours.
Crew haven't had near enough transition time with all our new equipment. And the engines are not even tested at warp power. And an untried captain.
2.5 years as Chief of Starfleet Operations may have made me a little stale, but I wouldn't exactly consider myself untried. They gave her back to me, Scotty.
Gave her back, sir? I doubt it was that easy with Nagura.
You're right.
Well, any man who could manage such a feat, I would not dare disappoint. She'll launch on time, sir, and she'll be ready.
I love the music of the motion picture. I had to let that clip run just to kind of let that music play out a little bit. So that's the introduction to the Enterprise. The Enterprise was always kind of treated like a character, at least by Captain Kirk throughout the television show, and then we get into the movie where we haven't seen any of them for a number of years, and this is the first time that we see the Enterprise as we'll know it for the next 6 movies, which very unique from what it looked like in the 60s. Because that, and I timed it out. So when he beams over to the space station, it's around minute 14 of the movie. And then it takes him about 3 minutes for that dialogue. So for them to go through the station, get onto the shuttle, and do their little talk about how he gave her back. And then there's another 5 minutes where nobody speaks and they just fly around in a shuttle. So it's all visual effects and reaction shot on Kirk and Scotty. That's it for 5 minutes of the movie. So it just, like I said, ties back into what I was talking about earlier. Like, I think it's great. This scene, it sets out that it gives that exposition of Kirk and his passion for being a Star Trek captain and how he wants it, and that sets up one of the minor plot points of the movie, and how he's going to take it over from Decker, and then it introduces the next member of the crew that we were all familiar with, but looks a little bit different, just like everybody else does in this movie, and that's the Enterprise. And we need 5 minutes to do that. So I feel that's fair, given the time length in between, episode 79 and the motion picture.
Yeah, and this is the scene that's missing from the episode that we covered today, isn't it? There's no proper introduction. This movie has to do it, and it does it right. And it's unfortunate that the series just didn't start out like this to treat the Enterprise as a character. And I think that's the right direction to have gone, and it's good that the movie decided to go in that direction.
Yeah, I absolutely think so, and it's a good looking ship. I like the way this Enterprise looks. It's one of my favorite designs. Maybe even my favorite Enterprise design, actually, out of the ones that we've seen so far. It's obviously very important. We all know that the Enterprise and Kirk are a package. Like, one has to come with the other. You can't have one without the other, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, at least in these original ones. And I'm talking about the original Enterprise. I know there are other Enterprises, and I know that Captain Picard goes on the Enterprise as well, and I understand all of that. But I'm saying in this particular time, in 1979, if there's the Enterprise, then you have to have Kirk. And if Kirk's around, then he has to be on the Enterprise. It's not like we could have done a new Captain Kirk movie where he's on on the Reliant or something like that. A new ship with new adventures, a new crew, or something dumb like that. I don't think it would work. I don't think it would resonate as well after spending the three years on this ship.
So Starfleet is facing the greatest threat, and still just the Enterprise. Very episodic in that sense to have in a movie.
Yeah.
You would expect like for instance, like in First Contact, you see the fleet engage one Borg cube, and you would assume that this is the greatest threat that the Federation has faced. You'd see the entire fleet, and you don't.
Yeah, you would hope that there would be more ships around Earth than just this one that's being refitted.
Yes.
I think that's probably something that kind of a bigger plot hole that there's a whole fleet of ships and yet there's only one by the home base.
Yeah, I don't think you get a fleet really until DS9.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's usually very much individual ships. I think there's one episode of there is. It's I can't remember the name of the original series, but it's when the guy has created the computer that's going to run the ships from then on, and so he puts it on the Enterprise.
Oh, that's right.
And they do like that battle game. Yeah. So there's 4 ships actually. So it's the Enterprise and then 4 ships. And of course, the computer tries to take over the Enterprise. And so on and so forth.
Yeah, what makes this scene great too is this is the Enterprise that Kirk blows up, huh?
This is, yes.
He destroys
gets
this
destroyed 2 movies later.
And it follows a great linear progression because this Enterprise in the next movie is beat up pretty badly by Khan. Then later on we see it destroyed with the Klingons on the bridge.
Yeah. And again, in the Wrath of Khan, Kirk has to weasel his way into the captain's chair. It's not as dirty as it is in this one. Like you do get the sense, like from everyone's reaction, that Kirk did something not okay to take that command away from Decker to get the ship.
Yeah, he's that's an interesting point to bring up, and how mad Decker is.
Yes.
About the thing. And
right.
Certainly, we have plenty more episodes in the future to discuss Mr. Decker and this movie, and great scene.
Oh yeah. There's plenty of stuff to go through.
So next we get to hailing frequencies.
Open hailing frequencies.
Frequencies open, sir.
This is Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the Enterprise. Klaxon vi Blajblanarnik Kamnik.
I hope it was written in the script like that. I'd love to see that script. So hailing frequencies. This is the section of the Trek Brothers where you send us your emails. And this is the first week we have no emails, do we?
No fans. Nobody knows that we exist yet.
Not at all. You could reach us at thetrekbrothers@gmail.com, and we're on Twitter also, right? You could just type into Twitter the Trek Brothers Podcast.
Yes.
You can follow me. I'm Lethargic Nerd.
I am Shaun Makita. It's ShaunMikita.
And
find
nice. Our website is thetrekbrothers.wordpress.com.
Yeah, and a quick correction: the Trek Brothers podcast on Twitter is actually at 2 Trek Brothers, and the word 2, TWO, Trek Brothers.
Ah, it's good. Good to know.
It's our Twitter handle.
That is kind of complicated, actually.
There's a lot there. You're going to want to subscribe. You can go to the WordPress. You can follow us at the Trek Brothers. You can follow me and Chris on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. It's all over the place. Everyone has everything. There's social networks all over.
Yes. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I rather enjoyed the podcast.
I had fun. This was good. Hopefully we don't do it so late next time. This isn't live, but for those listening to this later, it's far past my bedtime.
Yes, far past mine. So send us your feedback. Send us some emails. We'll get in there. We'll have a good time, and we wish you all the best.
I can see you, Kirk.
We'll see you next week.
Yes. Goodbye.
I'm bloodsucker. Dirty work now. Do you hear me? Kill you!
Set a course. For home.
I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise.
Hey Chris, throughout Star Trek, the original series, there's always these women that just like have no clothes, like next to no clothes on, right?
Mm-hmm.
How that makes me feel? It makes me feel like this. That's what happens.